everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you all for being here. I would like to begin by acknowledging the leadership of my co-chairs at this year's Energy and Mines Ministers Conference, Caitlin Cleveland and Caroline Wawzonek, and to thank all those who contributed to this conference here in the Northwest Territories. Truly, it was an exceptional experience, and you were wonderful hosts. Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the tragic accident that occurred on Wednesday, where a plane carrying 3 heroes fighting wildfires crashed. This is a terrible accident, and the Government of Canada expresses our sincerest condolences to the passengers' families and communities. We stand ready to support our colleagues in the Northwest Territories as they fight wildfires and grapple with this loss. So, ladies and gentlemen, over the past 3 days, we've come together to have a serious and substantive discussion about how we can develop and unlock Canada's abundant energy and natural resources in order to provide prosperity and security for Canada and for our allies around the world. Around the table were federal, provincial, and territorial ministers, alongside Indigenous leaders, industry representatives, all focused on a shared challenge. How do we fully realize Canada's energy and critical minerals potential in a world that is volatile and increasingly competitive? We arrive with a clear purpose, and we leave with a clear message. Team Canada is aligned. Team Canada is moving forward, and Team Canada is ready to build together. In this country, energy and natural resources are not just economic assets. They are the foundations of who we are. Across industries, they help us provide for our families, deliver prosperity to our communities and our cities, and fund our public services. As was abundantly clear this week, every part of our country plays a role. We have vast energy resources in our western and Atlantic provinces. We are fortunate to operate some of the world's best hydro projects. We've built some of the safest nuclear assets in the world in Ontario and New Brunswick. And the territories are home to some of the best critical mining opportunities anywhere on Earth. That means that when Canada puts all its energy and natural resources cards together, we have a very strong hand. To build on that strength, your federal government is relentlessly focused on cooperative federalism with energy mines and ministers and across the entire government. That's how our country was designed to function under our Constitution, a system of different roles and responsibilities, puzzle pieces that fit together to make Canada work no matter where we live. It's how we move from disagreements amongst ourselves that divide to delivery that provides for Canadians and for the world. Today, I'm pleased to highlight concrete evidence that our unity is producing real results for Canadians. First, in the area of electricity. As we all know, we are experiencing a rupture in the world order. International trade is being reordered. Wars in Europe and the Middle East have reshaped energy security. Artificial intelligence and data infrastructure are driving unprecedented demand for electricity. Climate change is intensifying, and countries around the world are asking the same question. Where will reliable, affordable energy we need to power our economies come from? For Canada, led by our federal government, the answer begins with what we control. Supplying and controlling our own electricity, building a stronger and more sovereign economy, creating high-paying Canadian careers, and ensuring that the power that underpins our industries, homes, and communities and future technologies are clean, reliable, affordable, and Canadian. That was the challenge Prime Minister Carney set for Canada in May when we announced our forthcoming National Electricity Strategy. We know Canada's electricity demand is expected to double by 2050. So we will double the capacity of our grid. We will build new major electricity projects. We will connect fragmented grids through new transmission infrastructure, and we will train young Canadians for great, well-paying careers in the electricity sector. We will do this in partnership with provinces and territories that have jurisdiction over the grids, with Indigenous peoples who are leading the transition to more sustainable electricity, and with industry and utilities who are on the front lines of building and delivering electricity to Canadian homes, businesses, schools, factories, and hospitals. To develop this strategy, consultations have been launched with provinces, territories, Indigenous peoples, utilities, and unions. A key pillar of our strategy and area of consultation is how we will connect Canada's fragmented regional grids through new, expanded transmission lines. Transmission lines are critical to our mission to build one Canadian economy out of 13 provincial and territorial economies, to be our own best customer, and to catalyze billions of dollars in new investment. In fact, a 2020 report demonstrated that a $1.7 billion investment in interprovincial transmission could attract an additional $6.6 billion in private funding for transmission alone, and an additional $92.5 billion over 10 years for renewable power. To catalyze projects like this, as part of our upcoming strategy, the Government of Canada has referred the Transmission Interconnect Investment Strategy to the Major Projects Office. The Major Projects Office will identify high-priority transmission projects as well as possible financial solutions to help them move forward. As part of that identification process, and after discussion at the table this week, I'm pleased to announce that the federal government has committed to prioritizing financial and regulatory support for the following 5 transmission projects: the British Columbia Yukon Grid Connect, an approximately 800-kilometer high-voltage direct current transmission line that would support industrial and economic development in the Yukon, including for critical minerals, and has been previously supported by $40 million in investment from Natural Resources Canada. Restoring the electricity transfer capacity between Alberta and British Columbia. Improvements to the Alberta-Saskatchewan intertie that will strengthen regional electricity trade. The Saskatchewan-Manitoba intertie, which would expand the intertie's transfer capability by up to 2 gigawatts along the Regina to Winnipeg corridor, all significantly enhancing the energy partnerships between the two provinces. And the Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick Interconnection Expansion Project, which will enhance regional system stability and trade in the Maritimes. We are supporting these projects because it is through transmission lines like these and a more connected electricity system writ large that we can improve reliability, we can lower costs, and we can support economic growth while ensuring Canadians benefit from Canadian power first. Moving to mining. I'm also proud to announce that we have made significant progress on an ambitious project that we have been developing with provinces and territories, the Canadian Digital Core Library. The CDCL is a national platform that will facilitate access to digitized drill core data from across the country. For those who are unfamiliar, drill cores provide valuable information about mineral deposits and the size, quality, and economic potential of a mineral resource. This information is what allows Canada to develop new strategic mining projects across the country and mine the resources that underpin national defense, advanced manufacturing, and energy transition. Canada stores millions of meters of geological drill core in repositories across the country, making it one of the largest drill core libraries in the world. In fact, laid out from end to end, Canada's total drill core catalog would extend across the country from Vancouver to St. John's, nearly spanning the entire width of the country. But until recently, we had never talked about digitizing this data. even though we've seen our allies generate huge economic benefit from doing so. We have now committed to scanning our first cores by September of this year, and to make this ambitious goal a reality, at EMMC this year we signed agreements with 11 of 13 provinces and territories to scan their drill cores. This is a significant milestone because the majority of public drill core in Canada is held by provinces and territories, meaning that collaboration between governments of Canada and provincial and territorial governments is essential to successfully develop the CDCL. Alongside contributions from industry who also hold drill core repositories, these agreements mark a significant step towards in a new Team Canada approach to analyzing drill core data. We are also supporting the developments of the drill core library with a $15 million investment in funding for the Creative Destruction Lab, who will create this drill core platform. Initiatives like these show us that Team Canada is united not only in our priorities, strengthening energy security, advancing critical minerals, and reinforcing Canada's prosperity and sovereignty, but also in our approach. This whole week has been a perfect example of this cooperation. We know that we cannot build a strong, secure, low-carbon grid without nuclear energy. So we announced Canada's first ever nuclear energy strategy, standing with Ontario, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan earlier this week. We know we cannot build responsibly for the long term without not only Indigenous participation, but also ownership. So we announced the federal government's largest ever Indigenous loan guarantee for the Williams Treaty First Nation to take a stake in the Darlington new nuclear project earlier this week. We know we need to unlock and de-risk clean technology, sustainable mining, and new infrastructure projects. So while in Yellowknife, I was proud to announce nearly $90 million for projects that address those exact goals, not only here in the Northwest Territories, but also in British Columbia, Yukon, Manitoba, and Quebec. This includes $50 million to the Clecho government and Fortune Minerals to advance the NICO Project Access Road, a 51-kilometer road to serve Fortune Minerals' cobalt, copper, and bismuth project from Wate to the proposed mine site. Finally, we know we need to build big things faster in this country while maintaining rigorous environmental standards and respect for Indigenous rights. That's why, standing with our partners from the Northwest Territories in their beautiful legislature, we announced your federal government is starting the process to list 3 transformative major projects under the Building Canada Act, including the Mackenzie Valley Highway. These projects will make Canada stronger, more secure, more prosperous, and better connected. Of course, it should be noted that 2 of the 3 projects were in the North. That's not an accident. The North is fundamental to Canada's future. Not only do Northerners recognize that, not only does the federal government recognize that, led by the first Prime Minister born in the North, but based on the discussions at the table this week, it's clear that every corner of the country recognizes that. At the same time, there was a clear understanding that the development in the North must be done in a way that reflects its unique realities. That means advancing sustainable resource development, strengthening northern energy systems, and investing in electrification and infrastructure here. Through initiatives such as our upcoming National Electricity Strategy, we are working in partnership with territorial and Indigenous partners to build more reliable and resilient electricity systems across the North. And we recognize that territorial governments operate under distinct regulatory systems and priorities which must be respected as we move forward together. Because for Northerners, this is about more than policy. It's about lowering costs, increasing reliability, and opening the door to new economic opportunities. Furthermore, Indigenous partnership was not a side discussion here. It was central to everything we did. It's why we started this year's EMMC by engaging directly with leadership from national Indigenous organizations and with Indigenous leaders here in the Northwest Territories. These discussions reinforced a shared understanding that success for Indigenous peoples and for all Canadians' ambitions depend on respect for rights, expanding economic participation, and sustained partnership throughout the life of our projects, and creating early engagement, equity, and ownership opportunities, all while ensuring that development leads to shared prosperity. Across Canada, more than 500 agreements in the mining sector alone, the massive success of Canada's Indigenous loan guarantee system, whether it is in the Sunrise Pipeline expansion in BC or this week's announcement at Darlington, and the many Indigenous-led projects we've referred to the Major Projects Office, it demonstrates what is possible when Indigenous communities are true partners. Our job is now to build on that foundation and to ensure that future projects reflect that same model of partnership. Because in Canada, the best projects are ones we build together. Finally, there was a real acknowledgement that we are in an energy crisis right now. While Canada is blessed to be an energy superpower, the ongoing disruption in the Straits of Hormuz has caused our own energy prices to rise and many of our allies to rethink their entire energy supply chains. That's why this week's meeting also placed strong emphasis on the resilience and security of Canada's energy systems. There was a shared focus on strengthening reliability across both fuel supply and electricity systems, including through better coordination on emergency preparedness and more integrated domestic energy networks. We also discussed the importance of growing Canada's biofuel sector and working towards the objective of meeting 60% of our domestic demand for biofuels with Canadian production by 2030. I will be very clear. Energy security is national security. And as your federal government, we know nothing is more important than that. Let me conclude with this. This conference was not simply an opportunity to exchange views. As I've said, the time for talking about talking is over. Now we need to build, because ultimately Canadians will judge us not by what we say, but what we do, and that's what they should do. Canada has what the world wants. Now we have to deliver it by building, to power the world and our country. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Notre prochaine coprésidente est l'honorable Caroline Wawzonek, ministre des Finances, ministre responsable des infrastructures stratégiques, de l'énergie et des chaînes d'approvisionnement et ministre responsable de la Société d'énergie des territoires du Nord-Ouest. Our next co-chair is the Honorable Caroline Wawzonek, Northwest Territories Minister of Finance, Minister responsible for strategic infrastructure, energy and supply chains, and Minister responsible for the Northwest Territories Power Corporation.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Bon après-midi à tous et tous. And thank you very much for joining us as we're concluding the 2026 Energy and Mine Ministers Conference here in Yellowknife. On behalf of the Government of the Northwest Territories, I want to sincerely thank all ministers, Indigenous leaders, delegates, speakers, and officials who participated and made this year's conference so special. I also want to thank you, Minister, for acknowledging the air tragedy we experienced here this week, and it has certainly affected us here and all members of our communities. Over the last several days, we've had important discussions about Canada's energy future, its infrastructure needs, and the partnerships that are required to support long-term prosperity across this country. In the North, energy security, infrastructure, Indigenous partnerships, and sovereignty are all interrelated. Reliable transportation networks, resilient energy systems, strong partnerships with Indigenous governments, these are essential to supporting communities and to supporting and strengthening Canada's presence in the North. This is what will create opportunities and health and wellness for future generations. A recurring theme throughout the conference has been the importance of collaboration. We've found throughout, and even a year ago, that we need to move past, as you've said, just talking about talking. We need to be collaborating in a meaningful sense. And that has been found here this week in terms of the structures that we've created, the pathways we've created to improve our paths for sharing, improve our mechanisms for information sharing, improve our mechanisms for partnering, so that we can truly show the value of Team Canada to the world. The conversations we've had have reinforced the importance of nation-building infrastructure that connects communities, strengthens supply chains, improves energy security, and supports economic resilience across this country. The tone has been realistic about the challenges that we are facing, but also, I would suggest, very positive about the opportunities and possibilities that Canada holds. I want to thank our federal co-chair, the conference organizers, volunteers, Indigenous partners for helping make this a success. It's been a privilege to welcome delegates here to the Northwest Territories and to share about some of the opportunities and challenges and perspectives that shape life here in Canada's North. With that, I turn to Minister Cleveland.
Notre dernière coprésidente est l'honorable Caitlin Cleveland, ministre de l'Industrie, du Tourisme et de l'Investissement des Territoires du Nord-Ouest. Our final co-chair is the Honorable Caitlin Cleveland, Northwest Territories Minister of Industry, Tourism and Investment.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. It has been an absolute honor to host the 2026 Energy and Mines Ministers Conference here in Yellowknife. There has been no shortage this week of purposeful discussion over 3.5 very full days. And we started these conversations off right. And with that, I'd like to thank all of the Indigenous leaders from across the Northwest Territories and those who advocate for Indigenous peoples across this country for making the trip and sharing their perspectives and priorities for development with all of the ministers from across the country. I'd also like to thank the ministers themselves, the deputy ministers, and their officials for their active participation and engaging conversation that we've had the good fortune of having over multiple days that resulted in many decisions. And I have to say those conversations weren't just isolated to this week. It has been a very full-packed year where we have decided that we need to make sure that we are treating this time with urgency and that we are working hard on behalf of the Canadians that we collectively and individually serve. As I've noted more than once this week, the Northwest Territories is endowed with great mineral riches and with new investments in infrastructure and also poised to encourage the future investment of further infrastructure and also with other exciting projects in critical minerals and also energy potential. It was exciting to get to talk about the Northwest Territories, but we can't, as the Minister said, just talk about them. We are seeing right now attention and also action on and in the North like never before, and it's important that we keep up this momentum. But we need to make sure that as we continue these conversations and this momentum, that NWT residents and communities benefit for generations from the mineral, energy, and supporting infrastructure projects that are unfolding right now in the North. So I'd like to thank all attendees again for their time, as well as organizers from both the GNWT and NRCan, who have been working behind the scenes to make sure that this week runs smoothly and that we're able to do our hard work together. I'd also like to extend a huge thank you to Yellowknifers who were very welcoming for our guests over the past week as they worked hard, not during the day, but also worked hard at night to make sure that they were getting to see the sights, sounds, and feel the warmth of the Northwest Territories. So huge thank you to Northerners for this week, and I will pass back to yourself to open the floor for questions.
Nous passons maintenant à la portion questions-réponses de la conférence de presse, en débutant avec les médias en présentiel, suivis de ceux en virtuel. S'il y a des médias inscrits en ligne, veuillez trouver le modérateur dans la section de discussion. Veuillez indiquer votre nom et le nom de votre média dans la section de clavardage et nous vous mettrons dans la file d'attente pour les questions. J'invite maintenant les journalistes qui sont sur place à venir au micro et à poser leurs questions. Veuillez préciser votre nom et le nom du média que vous représentez. Nous procédons avec une question et un suivi par personne. We will now turn to the media Q&A portion of the press conference. We will start with questions and answers from media on-site and then move to those joining virtually. If there are any registered media online, please find the moderator in the chat section and let us know your name and outlet. We will put you in the queue for questions. I now invite the media in the room to approach the microphone and ask questions. Please provide your name and outlet. We'll go with one question and one follow-up per person.
Hi, this is Yumna Iftikhar from CBC North. From this week, what are the main takeaways for NWT residents? And out of the announcements that have come out this week, how much of it brings new funding to the residents that was not announced in the budget or wasn't announced prior to this week?
Thanks very much for your question. One of the biggest things has been bringing not only federal ministers, but the staff, the officials, and other colleagues from across the country to the north is to actually create a better understanding of the size and scale of the country. I've reminded a lot of my colleagues this week that they're kind of in just the baby north, that this is just, you touch down here and then you really have to start going north. So just having an actual sense and understanding as Canadians as to the size and magnitude of this country, that is not a small thing. It helps us all understand as a federation some of the challenges that we face domestically and the challenges and the urgency of overcoming them. So as we're all moving through nation building projects and wanting to find support for nation building projects, it is quite fundamentally important that every leader in the country understands some of the challenges that we're dealing with here. So just from a perspective of understanding, bringing people to the north to have the conversations here is quite fundamental. Moving on, and I guess you were asking some of the, there's a couple parts in there. Some of the things from this week that we talked about, one of the big ones was around the collaboration I mentioned at the beginning, collaboration and sharing, information sharing, partnering. How are we going to take some of our assets out into the world? I don't want to take Minister Cleveland's thunder on mineral resources, but the first day of the event is talking about how do we better help the world understand what we have here. So we've had visits from ambassadors to come to the Northwest Territories, from India, from South Korea, but we're just one government. Federal government being at the table and helping us sell those assets to the world is a huge part of it. So having better structures by which to do that, better pathways to information share is quite critical. We're too small to do it by ourselves. As far as some of the announcements this week, really the one that I'm highlighting and landing on is for the Mackenzie Valley Highway. And at this stage in time, it wasn't new money per se. It was that we are now moving through a fundamental process that the federal government set up of how we're going to nation build. And we are at the vanguard of going through that process of becoming now into moving towards being listed, which means the federal family is now bringing its powers to bear, its resources to bear to engage with communities up and down the valley. So the funding in my mind, if we're being supported and this project goes forward, then the funding will continue to flow from that. We have to do the work to get there, but this was a major step forward in what has been a real tremendous sea change of process. If we're building this country differently and we're now at the front end of that as the North, I think that's a tremendous announcement and I'm really excited about it. Thanks.
And if I can add into that, we had an announcement this morning which saw over $50 million coming to the Northwest Territories, specifically for an access road into Nico Mine, which is a cobalt, bismuth, gold, and copper mine here in the Northwest Territories on Clecho territory. That is funding that has been made available through the first and last mile fund. And in addition to funding for the access road, it also included funding for Indigenous participation in the project, as well as caribou guardianship funding, which, as we know, are two things that are imperative for projects in the Northwest Territories and critically important to the success of projects in the territory. Another thing that I'm really excited about that the Minister Hodgson did refer to was the NWT's involvement in the core library work that is undergoing, and so that really supports increased exploration here in the Northwest Territories by being very transparent about the information that we do have available, not just across the country, but specifically here in the Northwest Territories about our geology. So very exciting.
For the follow-up, one of the new announcements was the Yukon, or the 5 different transmission projects that are happening. Could the success of those projects, or even like the conversation that has happened so far, lead to conversations that could include the Northwest Territory?
Yes. Yeah, look, energy is one of the single biggest challenges that has the potential to hold back the whole North. We're not on the North American energy grid. We have isolated systems scattered across the territory, 40% of Canada's landmass, and we're all redundantly built burning diesel. We must solve energy in the North. But we also need to figure out our own localized grids ourselves. So the Tulsen project, which has right now been referred already to the Major Projects Office, we're working closely with them. I'm now gunning towards having that one listed as well. So it's got tremendous momentum behind it. Once we can resolve having an actual grid here in the territories, then absolutely. We are looking at what does that mean? Can we be moving into sharing with Saskatchewan? Can we be moving into be sharing with Alberta and to get ourselves on the grid? But if we're just tying into the southern portion of our territory and we're not maximizing our own resources and we don't have our own intertie, that doesn't solve the energy problem. So we need to make some of those solutions here first, and then the next step will be to joining on. So the pathway that we talked about this week, and we spoke about it just this morning, is what are those national pathways going to look like to have jurisdictions come together? But before that is the conversation that ties probably more to our first announcements, which is tied to our projects that are at the major projects office. So let's get those pieces done. Two of the three already are moving towards listing, right? The Nunavut portion of Arctic Economic Security Corridor and Mackenzie Valley Highway are moving to listing. As I say, I want Hodgson and our half of the AESC to be next. And then absolutely, the longer term conversation must be about getting on the grid, but we need to do our domestic homework first.
Thank you.
Next question. Prochaine question.
Hi, James O'Connor, CKLB. The NICO project now appears to be set to move forward. 50 million, that was a good announcement. What mine project is next? What can we expect to hear next? Some good news about.
Well, I am consistently speaking with my partner over at the federal government, and I always like to give him an opportunity to come back up to the north and announce anything that he so desires. We definitely work closely with industry partners and also with the federal government to make sure that we all have the same information about where projects are at, because we want to make sure too as Canadians that we're investing in projects that are going to be successful and that are going to bring benefit to the residents, not just of the Northwest Territories, but also of Canada. So I'll continue doing my part in that and making sure that I am well connected with communities, with industry, and also with the federal government. And as soon as I know and have something public for you, James, I'll make sure to let you know.
Fantastic. Indigenous participation, ownership was mentioned. You said there were Indigenous leaders here. Discussions were had. What roadblocks, if any, or what concerns were expressed by the Indigenous leaders who were here?
So the conversations are consistent, and so making sure that we're learning from life over the last 100 to 30 years specifically to do with diamond mining. And so we're seeing an evolution of how Indigenous governments want to be engaged with, but also how they want to do business. And what we're hearing a lot of, not just in the Northwest Territories, but clear across this country, is a desire to be involved in equity ownership of projects, and also to make sure that we're working specifically here in the Northwest Territories very hard on workforce development. We are hearing this not just about mining projects, but also about our major infrastructure projects as to how we make sure that training is available across this country, not just in our major metropolitan centers, but also in small communities.
Thanks.
We'll move online to Dylan Follett, Northern News. On passe en ligne avec Dylan Follett de Northern News.
Hi. Both the Nika Road project and the Mackenzie Valley Highways are awaiting forms of approval, whether it be listing or the community agreement with the Pluto government. So is there anything tangible Northerners will see coming out of this in the short term?
So tangible progress, I guess sometimes people, I want to see shovels in ground as much as anybody else. When we started this journey to come this year and host this year, we right away out of the gate said we don't want to just come here and have reports and studies. And we have worked very hard. We had a work plan as a group to get to where we are today so that we weren't doing that. So that we were looking at industrial zones of where can we all put our attentions. We were looking at these deliverables about how are we going to better collaborate as FPTs, as federal, provincial, territorial partners, to take ourselves out into the market and into the world as Team Canada. So there's concrete things we've happened here. And I'm using that example because those are the structures and the processes that actually do start to deliver the things. So when we're moving through a process like being listed at the Major Projects Office, the minute the Major Projects Office was announced, our team was down there before we were even referred. And then we were referred in, and we've had their folks up here consistently and regularly since then. So now, barely a year on, there's MOUs signed between Indigenous governments up and down the valley. They've never had that kind of level of collaboration and working arrangement before. They are creating structures by which they will partner and work together. Their business development arms are creating structures by which they will partner and work together. I mean, the acceleration of that kind of work and progress, we've never seen things like that happen in the North. So, you know, it doesn't have the visual of, you know, me wearing the hard hat and putting the shovel in the ground, but in terms of the actual process, progress, and structures that we're in, the way that we can move these projects forward has never been in as good a place as it is. So, you know, yeah, as far as, you know, the tangibleness, it's you can't hold, you know, you can't hold that kind of an agreement, but you can certainly see that we're not moving through these processes as fast as we are on a national scale, but for the fact that there's real things happening in how we govern, how we structure, and what we study. So, you know, Hodgson right now, we've got hydrologists out there finishing where the line's going to go under the ground. Engineers are now prepared doing where it's going to land on either side of the lake. These are steps that haven't happened before. They're all happening at the same time. You know, can you hold it in your hand? Perhaps not. But does it mean that you're going to have a planned project that's ready to be delivered much faster than it was a year ago? Absolutely. Thanks.
The only thing that I would add into that is that neither of these are new projects. These are projects that are very much already underway. Now they do have the certainty of the funding piece behind them. And even as far as NICO and Fortune Minerals goes, within the last 2 weeks we've seen engagement in communities, which is imperative to projects. And so these are not projects that are starting from scratch. They're not projects that are you know, starting from zero. These are projects that now have momentum behind them so that we can get them done. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Y a-t-il d'autres questions?
This question is on behalf of CBC Yukon. The transmission line between BC and Yukon that was just announced. Yukon's capital city was just shy of rolling blackouts last winter. Is this going to help, and is this enough to ensure that Yukon doesn't have rollouts?
I'm not going to speak for the Yukon. What I can say is that the Yukon has an active plan that they've shared with the federal government around how they can dramatically increase the capacity of their grid consistently with the electricity strategy. There's ongoing discussions between the Yukon government and the federal government. They have a very credible plan for doing that. Obviously, one way to make the Yukon grid more resilient still is to connect it to the North American grid. That next step of building the grid, connecting the Yukon to BC, is an important step. What has to happen first is the North Coast transmission line in BC needs to get built. That project is before the major project, is at the major projects office right now. I believe they're breaking ground on that this summer. Once that's built, we can add the intertie between BC and Yukon, and that should dramatically improve the reliability and the resilience of the Yukon electricity grid.
And how will this help Yukon or businesses in Yukon?
Secure, stable, reliable electricity is fundamental. It's fundamental to economic development. It's fundamental to health and well-being, and ultimately, energy security is national security. So, having the Yukon have a robust grid is a good, strong electric grid connected to the North American grid is good for it economically. It's good for national security, and it's good for the sustainability of the economy in the Yukon.
Thank you, ministers, and thank you to the participating media representatives. This concludes the event. L'événement est maintenant terminé. Merci aux ministres et aux médias. For any further questions, please contact NRCan Media Relations. Coordinates will be added to the online chat. Have a great day. L'événement est maintenant terminé. Si vous avez d'autres questions, veuillez communiquer avec l'Unité des relations avec les médias de Ressources naturelles Canada. Les coordonnées seront ajoutées dans la section de clavardage en ligne. Bonne journée à tous.